since we last spoke, and I have moved flats and I've done a lot of things, and some things have changed, and I did film a vlog of that, but I didn't get around to uploading it because it wasn't perfect and I placed way too much value on the cinematic quality of everything, so that kind of turned to dust. Also, I was in kind of a foul mood the whole time because I had a tummy ache, and so I think you can empathize with that. I figured what better way to get back into things with a bunch of books, because we haven't spoken about books for a while and I need to speak about books every so often or I will implode. And what better topic than books that put the wonder and the horror of girlhood into words. Girlhood has always been explored through art, always in such different ways, and it's incredible that transition, that transient coming of age story from girlhood to womanhood and that liminal space in between. I think that's explored in so many vital ways, and these are some of my favorite books that cover this, ways that I relate to girlhood the most. So my girlhood was quite feral and unrelenting. I grew up on a myriad of farms, tiny towns in rural Australia, and I spent my time in paddocks with little lambs and making mud pies and climbing trees, and that whole experience was kind of cast by this small town syndrome, spooky, afraid of what lies in the woods and all the secrets, and just this strange energy that you can't really explain. When I got a little bit older, we moved closer to the city and away from the small towns, and then I got distracted by other things like the unattainable standard of beauty and academic validation and achievements and perfectionism and sneaking out late at night with people who didn't care if I lived or died. That rhymed. I'm a poet. I was a little delinquent and that might not be relatable for everybody, but the entertainment value is there, and I think that I have some books that really put that experience into words in such a unique way. I think that girlhood is this magical, omnipotent thing where it's so soft and sweet and lovely and beautiful and precious, but it's so terrifying and cunning and sly and unrelenting, and it's horror filled and it's wonder filled, as the title suggests. So, you know, this kind of dichotomy is so hard to explain, but these books just do it so well. Anyway, this is a long introduction. Let's talk about the books in a minute. Because before we talk about the books, I want to talk about Skillshare. If we've spent any time together before, then you will know that I love Skillshare, because Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for anybody who wants to expand their creativity or learn new skills. A recent class that I really enjoyed was a still life class from Dylan Mezwinski, which I found really inspiring and insightful. I'm not new to painting, but I'm not great at my technicalities, so it offered a lot of theory behind the practice, and Dylan encourages experimentation with the brushes and colours, which I need because I always get a little stuck in perfectionism. Beyond this, Skillshare has really helped me advance in my career path. Whilst I enjoy hobby-based classes like still life painting, these bleed into my career as someone who actively promotes the creation and consumption of art. You may know Skillshare for classes in creative hobbies, but Skillshare offers so much more, like career-focused classes that are perfect for pursuing your passions and reinventing yourself. This class on creative confidence motivated me and reminded me why I do what I do and to pursue it unapologetically. I really want to incorporate my appreciation for film into my creative career, and this class was brilliant. I'm so excited about future projects that will supplement my career. Making art is the most important thing to me, so learning about different mediums of performing this is vital. No goal is too small. And luckily for you, the first 1,000 people to sign up to Skillshare, using the link in my description box, will get a free 1-month trial. In no particular order, I'm going to be opening with Roots by Dizzy Tate, and this is one of the most brutal books I have ever read. Also one of the most interesting and unique and beautiful. Spoiler alert, all books will have the same interesting, unique, beautiful and brutal defining features, because to me that is girlhood. To some, this book is about a group of girls who are stuck in a small town and they want to leave the small town and make a name for themselves, but the small town is shrouded in secrecy and a young girl goes missing, and it's all about who's going to make it and who's prettier and who has more talent. It's very much that kind of perspective of the whole world's going to know my name, I'm better than everyone, I'm going to leave my small town, but they all have the same mentality, and who makes it, who doesn't. It's written from a group perspective, which I found really unique because it speaks from the group of girls, so it says we and us and we did this, and they referred to us, and it was really interesting. I really appreciated also how the timeline jumps around a lot from the girls as they've gotten older and the girls as a group when they're younger. I particularly loved this because as a girl raised in a tiny town myself, delusionally believing that she was destined for something greater, this book spoke to me. I think this book sums up small town syndrome quite well, and how competitive girlhood really is, because all these girls, whilst they're friends, are preying on each other's downfall so that, you know, they can be better than the rest. I love the way the girls are so innocent but so feral and unrelenting all at once, because, you know, that's real. That's this book. The next book we have is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides, and excuse me if I'm saying that wrong. I get corrected every time I say it a different way, so whatever. But this is perhaps the most relevant book on the list. This is about sisters who navigate their way through their own respective girlhoods and the trauma of it all. They come from a strict religious family, and this strict religious family use this as a means to keep the girls quite sheltered and away from the rest of the world and its evils, but that in itself is providing a different kind of evil. The girls obviously rebel and try and escape to experience the world as themselves, and this leads to different kinds of trauma, so these girls are just stuck in this rut of horror and wonder. I like the way that this book approaches religious trauma, the repercussions of strict families and sheltered lives and sisterhood. This was made into a brilliant film adaptation by Sofia Coppola. If you haven't seen it, see it. But I think that when anything is hyper-aestheticized and turned into film, it risks losing the initial meaning of what the book was about. And yes, the film and book does seem like it can romanticize the gritty and undesirable elements of girlhood, but I think that's the whole point, because girls do romanticize it, you know, we do romanticize the suffering as horrible as it is. I think it couldn't be more relevant because that is the female experience, expected to make even dying look pretty, or suicide as the title suggests. I think this is an absolute must-read, and the prose is breathtaking, but be warned of the content. The title suggests it all. The next book, another one of my all-time favorites, is The Girls by Emma Cline, and I am eternally grateful to my friend who gave me this book and said read it, because my life has never been the same. It's set in Northern California in the violent end of the 1960s, and the protagonist is a young girl who's bored by her domestic young girl life with her mother, and she sees a group of girls, hippies if you will, who she gets completely enthralled by, and she follows them, joins them. It's a Charles Manson cult spin-off, so we meet the kind of Charles Manson leader who's very charismatic and charming, and it's a really interesting tale of the innocence of the girls and how they are corrupted. The more time the protagonist spends away from her mother and on this ranch with these girls, she just spirals into this complete different version of herself. I think it's quite risque and unapologetic, but it pays off so well because I love the way it depicts the innocence of girlhood whilst also condemning them and holding them responsible for their actions. It also poses an interesting question on pack mentality and the way we will do almost anything if community and solidarity are promised. I think the writing is so sensorial and beautiful and some of the most brilliant prose that I've ever read, and I think this is another must-read. The next book we have, because I feel I should break up all this disturbing horror-filled girlhood with a little bit of romance and sparkle, is Bonjour Tristesse by Francois Sagan. Excuse my accent. This was written by her when she was 17, and this made me spiral because I found that out after I read it, and it's one of the most brilliant things I've read, so it's a real testimony to girlhood in itself. Set across one hot summer in the French Riviera, the protagonist's father has a younger mistress, and the protagonist is trying to find love herself, which the father does not approve of, and it's a tale of romance and a tale of this youthful, innocent, naive perception about how everything is glittering and lovely, and it's also so mature and wise, the way that she breaks it down and the commentary of it all. It's a tale of love and rebellion and family dynamics, and it's through the eyes of a really sharp, wise girl, but at the same time innocent. And it's naive, and it's just so lovely to read because the prose is breathtaking. You feel like you're there on the French Riviera laying under the sun. It's so lovely. The protagonist likes to really explain how she feels about things, and her attitudes are quite bohemian, and it's very refreshing, and it's just the dolce vita of youth, and I really love this. Now that I've broken up all the disturbing books with a light-hearted-ish book, I'm going straight back in with a very, very disturbing book. One of the more disturbing books of the list, and that is A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing from Emma McBride. It is her debut novel. I'm trying to think of how to condense this book because so much happens. This book destroyed me, and I think that I could leave it at that and you'd all go tripping over each other searching for this book, because I feel we've fostered a community here where we all love books that destroy us. I don't know how that happened, but I'm happy with it. Before you go searching for this, allow me to preface by saying it has major content warnings. I've warned you, this was an uncomfortable read, but alas, it's very important. It's set in rural Ireland, and from birth, I suppose, a girl is exposed to many kinds of traumas. Her younger brother is dying, her mother is abusive, her father is absent, she's stuck in a small town that is hyper-religious and uses this kind of God-soaked excuse as a way to allow the abuse that continues. And our protagonist is just a girl, and she is so vulnerable. There is nobody to protect her except for herself, and obviously that doesn't work. There is no happy ending in this book. It is just tragedy after tragedy, and it is horrifyingly detailed in the trauma. In saying that, it is, in my humble opinion, a work of goddamned art, and one of the most incredible things I've ever read. So unique. The narration is from the perspective of the half-formed girl, and so it starts off as the sentences would be quite short, quite choppy. She's not privileged, she's uneducated, so it really is quite authentic to what she would be thinking and saying. As she gets older throughout the years, it expands a little bit and the sentences get a little bit longer and she can comprehend things a little bit better, but it's a challenging read, but to me it reads like poetry. It was a winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2014, and the review on the front, the final line is "Read it and be changed," and I think that couldn't be more relevant. I don't know if I should do another traumatizing book or a light-hearted book, because I've only got one light-hearted book left and I have several traumatizing books left. What better way to continue than with Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, which is one of the most darkly disturbing but beautiful books I've read. I've sat here for a while trying to think how I could condense the plot, but the plot is rich on this one, so I'm just going to read you the blurb in order to avoid grossly condensing it. It's been a while, but Camille Preaker has finally gone home. Sent to investigate the disappearance of two little girls, Camille finds herself reluctantly installed in the family mansion, reacquainting herself with her distant mother and a precocious 13-year-old half-sister she barely knows. Haunted by a family tragedy doubled by the disquieting grip her young sister has on the town, Camille struggles with a familiar need to be accepted. But as clues turn into dead ends, Camille finds herself identifying with the young victims and realizes she will have to unravel the puzzle of her own past if she's going to survive this homecoming. A bunch of content warnings, including assault, abuse, and self-harm, but the way that this is written is so unique and intense. The 13-year-old half-sister, her character is so complex, and I really appreciated this. She's cunning and she's terrifying and she somehow has everybody under her wing, but she's just a girl and she's a victim. Small towns are terrifying places for girls, for young girls, and small towns have a lot of secrets, as this book details. Now, to break that up with a more funny book, this is The Idiot by Elif Batuman, and the funny thing is that I despised this book when I first read it. I have a habit of that. I often read books and initially don't like them and go away, and then months later, it's almost been a year in this case, I think, oh, I get it. That was quite good, actually. It's one of those books where not much happens. It's more so a character study, and that, for me, can sometimes be wonderful, but often I need a lot to stay on track and entertained. And this is an interesting one because it's about a coming-of-age story where Celine, the protagonist, goes to college and has to find herself, and how her culture bleeds into this, and her literary analysis bleeds into this, and how her family bleed into this, and boys, their own kind of boys, bleed into this, and their culture and family. It reminds me very much of Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield's narration style, how it's just constantly He's just really just kind of hates everything, doesn't he? The main reason I didn't like this book was because I thought the protagonist was insufferable in a Holden Caulfield way, but I am now reminded that she is just a girl and she is trying to find her way in the world. The protagonist's commentary is dry and you can be trapped with her sometimes and desperately want to get away, but I think that offers a really unique and truthful perspective of girlhood. She's quite cynical and quite nihilistic about everything, and I think that that is definitely a lot of girls' takes on girlhood. Again, it's not for everyone initially, including myself, but a lot of people absolutely adore this book, so give it a try and see what you think. The next book I haven't spoken about in a while, and I used to speak about it all the time, and so I'm going to speak about it again because it is incredibly relevant of this topic, and that is Kate Elizabeth Russell's My Dog Vanessa. This book changed me. These are your advanced content warnings because this book is about a 15-year-old girl who was manipulated into love, quote unquote, because it's not love, is it, by her teacher. The timeline jumps around a lot from the young girl's perspective, who is currently being groomed and manipulated, and how she processes this and how she takes these cues and thinks that it is not manipulation, versus when she's older as an adult and trying to pathologize this and get over this and realize that it is what it was, and that's abuse. This is a book that made me realize things that I wish I didn't. I remember reading it and staring at my bedroom wall for 3 hours after, just thinking, this was a hard read, and this will be a hard read for most, if not all readers, but that's the whole point. This thing happens, it's rife, it's a rife experience amongst girlhood, and it provides a perspective of how this feels as the girl and then the adult looking back on it, so I think this is a vital read. The next 3 books I tragically don't have copies of here because they're either back home in Melbourne or I've lent them to a friend and never got back. This happens all the time. Anyway, the first book that I'm going to talk about that I don't have anything to hold for, which is absolutely excruciating for me, is called Somebody's Daughter. It is a memoir from author Ashley C. Ford, and it is about her own experience as a poor black girl growing up in Indiana with no father because he is in prison, with a mother who is trying her best, I suppose, but that's not manifesting well, and her own experience both trying to accept and acknowledge her race and culture whilst also honor this and reject this, you know, this whole experience of self-discovery and identity. I think it was really interesting to read this perspective of girlhood defined by the absence of a parent, the absence of a father, because that is the experience for so many. It was also really insightful to read this perspective from a poor black girl in Indiana and how she takes these elements of girlhood and tries to reclaim them. More so, she builds on the experience of growing up in the 80s and 90s where abuse towards children was normalized because it was correcting their behavior, and the ways that this impacts girlhood and coming of age into adulthood. It's very emotionally intelligent in a way that I wish I could be, and it's so honest and deeply affecting, and I really, really valued reading this. The next book is Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, and this is a book about, I think it's set in the late 60s, and a girl is admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she tried to overdose on pills. She then spends 18 months in this place, and from a collection of journal entries that comprises this book, we get to meet all different kinds of girls who are admitted and their mental illnesses, and she's eventually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, so it offers this kind of coming of age perspective as somebody who is very openly mentally unwell and struggling. The girls come and go, we love some characters, we despise some characters, we're worried about all the characters, and I think the entertainment value is consistently there, but what's most important to me is that it can be genuinely gut-wrenching and terrifying, and then silly and fun, and I think that's the experience of girlhood summed up perfectly. There's a film adaptation which I think is quite wonderful, and I'm not sure, it just feels refreshing and strangely reassuring. So check that one out. Last, and certainly not least, I left this book until last because there's no way to review this book, and it is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I'm sure you know what this book is about. It is about a Jewish girl, a young Jewish girl who's trying to navigate life in the thick of World War II, hiding with her family. It goes without saying that this book is a must read, and I remember when I was in school and my teacher gave me this book, she warned me about the weight of the book and said it was going to be a very intense read, and so I went in thinking it was going to be pure melancholy and distress and sadness as this family go through this absolutely horrible thing that nobody should have to go through. But I was shocked and surprised by how much life and laughter and kindness and happiness and silliness there is in that book, because it is ultimately written from the perspective of a young girl, and she's doing her best to make do with what she has, and it's really beautiful, I think. It's a tragic diary, but it's still the diary of a young girl, and she's wise beyond her years, and the way she writes things and puts things into perspective are so emotionally advanced. It is an absolute must read. That is the complete list. Well, it's certainly not complete, I could have kept going, but I think I spoke a lot and I've been filming for ages. I didn't go into this one knowing how many books I'd do. I just kind of picked up books off my floor and thought, this is good, this will work. Obviously, I'd like to say that girlhood is a transient thing and it's a loose term, and I don't want to exclude anybody by using the term girlhood, because this is for anyone to read and relate to or not relate to. And I obviously couldn't recommend a book from every single culture or race or experience, so if you have anything that you would love to recommend or think is absolutely vital, please comment it, and I will be making another list out of those comments to read myself, because I can never have enough books. I suppose this is the part where I say goodbye, so thank you for spending time with me, and it was nice to see you again. I'm going to stay for a little bit longer, and I hope you have a lovely day. Goodbye. I completely forgot to use this opportunity to plug my own book, because that details my own experience of girlhood and coming of age, so I should probably plug my own book. Do I have a copy? This is my copy, and they don't all look like this because mine is absolutely destroyed and it has blood across all the pages in my own notes. But this is my book. You can read it if you like. I love you.